Hey folks, Mike from LI Flies Mike here, and today we're going to be tying the Kinky Muddler by Jonny Kings. Now in the past we tied it with EP fiber, but today we're going to be tying it in a more traditional manner. As always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below. But today we're going to be using some Steve Farrar fiber, Slinky Fiber, Marabou, Saddle Hackle, and Bucktail, as well as some E6000, 3D Eyes, Liquid Fusion, Gamakatsu big game hooks, and super glue. We're going to get started here by taking our SL12S 2-odd here. You can always tie these in a larger size by simply increasing the length of the material that you're tying in. We're going to take some fine mono thread here and build up a base for our fly on the hook shank. So now taking some saddle hackle here, I have a Chinese saddle hackle patch. And I'm just looking for some nice triangle tapered feathers here. And I'm going to be using some white, some blue, and some olive here to create a nice Killie color, or at least attempting to get the best imitation of a striped Killie I can. To create a pillow or support for our hackle, we're going to be tying in some bucktail. Now, a lot of flies you see me tie on the channel, we just tie the bucktail straight on top. We're actually going to be tying the bucktail in using a couple loose wraps, and then we're going to spread it around 360 degrees evenly around the hook shank. This is something Bob Popovics does on the bulkhead, for instance. By loosely wrapping the bucktail, you can ensure that you can then spread it around and then secure it down properly. Now taking some saddle hackle here, before we tie this on, I'm going to explain to you how we actually tie the hackle on. Instead of tying our hackle perfectly flat like we would do with a deceiver, for instance, or perfectly flat curved down like a flat wing, we're actually going to tie it at a 45-degree angle. So all we're going to do is take the hackle, turn it inwards at a 45-degree angle, and you can see when we put the two feathers together, we're essentially creating almost like a tent or a canopy where it's hollow underneath on the inside. When you tie your hackle in, it's pretty important to not wrap it too hard. We would just want to secure it with one or two loose wraps, and that way we don't pinch the material, right? We don't pinch the hackle and it'll flay outwards. So using some light blue here, I'm going to try and imitate the striped killies or mamachugs that inhabit the local creek early in the spring. If you look in the rear section of their tail, there's a lot of light blue, so I figured it'd be nice to add some light blue to this fly. And now taking some olive hackle, again ensuring that we tie this in at a 45-degree angle to get our classic tented appearance for our hackle. If the feather doesn't cooperate, just try and find the right angle for it to sit. You might need to move the feather slightly so it's not sitting on top of another feather quill. And after we get the last feather in here, we can pinch down the hackle so it keeps its shape, and we can tie down really nice and tight, wrapping forward, ensuring that the hackle isn't going to flare out. And now this is something that we haven't done in the past, but watching Jonny Kings' video, he actually takes his thread and he wraps it underneath the hackle and then wraps on top. And we're going to do this 3 or 4 times. This will not only create a nice kind of arch to our hackle, which will prevent it from fouling as easily, but it'll also create a hollow area underneath our tented hackle, even more so. And it's going to allow the water to hit it and then create some great action. We're going to take some super glue here to ensure the fly is durable. And then taking some white marabou, a nice piece of white marabou, we're going to break off the smaller section near the tip. And tying this in from the front, I'm just going to now start palmering this hackle forward, just guiding it as I wrap forward. And what we're doing is we're covering up all of our thread wrapping from our saddle hackle. Now what I'm doing here is stopping halfway, and I'm going to now take some yellow saddle hackle and tie this on. But first I'm going to pinch that marabou and wrap down a couple times before tightening it, and then I'm going to secure it properly. It's always a good idea to wrap backwards on top of the marabou that you just palmered, ever so slightly, to help ensure that it's going to be durable. Brushing the fly out real quick, we're going to get our marabou laying nice and neat, and taking a yellow piece of marabou and just tying it in the same way we did with the white piece. And we're just going to cover up the rest of our saddle hackle that we tied on previously. And this marabou is just going to give us a nice transition from the lawn saddle hackle to the shorter synthetic material. Again, just guiding the material as we wrap so the feathers don't lay on top of each other. We're just going to do 2 or 3 wraps here just to get towards the front of where that saddle hackle was tied in and where that thread bump is. It's always a good idea to pull the marabou before you fully secure it so there's not any looseness in our wraps. And now we can go ahead and trim this and then tie on top. Again, taking some super glue here, we're going to ensure the fly is durable. You see me taking a piece of paper here and just wiping the excess super glue off so it dries quicker. Now taking some Slinky Fiber. This is what we used to use in the past before C4R fiber was a thing. We would take some angel hair, some different flash materials, and blend it with Slinky Fiber. But we're just going to take a pinch here, and about 2/3 the width of a pencil is what I'm using. We're going to go ahead and cut a section to V-tie. Now for our first V-tie, we want the material to be pretty long, almost the length of the marabou. Now something before we start tying our V-ties, if you want, you can use a clip or if something like this, a hair clip, to secure the marabou down so you don't end up cutting it and it's easier for you to work with the Slinky Fiber. I don't have an issue with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that off for now. And you can see here we have a small amount of room, really about half the hook shank we're going to be tying our Slinky Fiber V-ties. And this is important because you don't want to put too much material on the hook in general. So now tying some V-ties, we're going to take some white here. Again, the same amount that we cut off previously for the olive. And I like to have the material be pretty long for the initial tie because we're going to start tapering it down as we move forward. But I'm just going to go ahead and tie this in, offset at an angle, tying it right on the middle of the material. And then I'm going to go ahead and take some olive and tie this right on top, just like we did with the white, just offset at an opposite angle. And now, just like a hollow tie, it's really important that our thread is evenly wrapped top and bottom. And not only that, it's a good idea to make sure the material is evenly spread top and bottom. So you can see me here just kind of pushing this material. Now we'll go ahead and take our white Slinky Fiber here and just V-tie this back. And you don't need a lot of thread wrapping to secure it. This is something to take note of. Right here I could see that my white Slinky Fiber was slightly further back than the olive. So you can always just unwrap it and correct it. Now here, just to get that white Slinky Fiber tied further up the hook shank so I have an even tie, I just wrap it down a couple times, and then I'm just going to go ahead and re-V-tie it. And again, essentially all the V-tie is folding the material back on the opposite angle, and it's shaped like a V afterwards. And we're just building a nice 3D profile to the fly. Now what I'm doing here is, after the V-tie, I'll take the gap where the two colors meet and I'll just kind of spread the material around by pulling on it. And it's going to help ensure that we don't have any gaps between those two colors. Now again, taking some super glue here, just ensuring that this fly is going to be durable. Using that piece of paper to spread the super glue not only ensures that we're taking any excess off, we also can get full coverage on our thread wraps. So now moving forward, we're going to tie our next V-tie here, and I'm slightly tapering down the length of the material because it doesn't need to be as long. We still want it to be fairly long because we are going to be trimming this fly. As you tie more of these, you'll get comfortable and you'll figure out exactly how much material you can use without sacrificing the shape of the fly and not also sacrificing too much material. And just ensuring that our ties are even top and bottom and that the material is evenly spread on the sides. We're going to go ahead and V-tie our olive and then flip it over and do the same to the white Slinky Fiber. You can see here we have room for about 2 more ties. Again, ensuring our material is spread on the sides so we don't have any gaps. Depending on the profile and the shape of the fly, you can adjust whether you want more material on the top and bottom, more material on the sides, but I'm going for kind of a wide body Killie here. Taking some Steve Farrar blend, or SF blend. This is essentially Slinky Fiber with angel hair pre-blended. I'm going to go ahead and take 3 or 4 colors here for the top. Some blue, some chartreuse, some olive, and some gray. And for the belly, I'm going to take some white and fluorescent yellow. And after blending them together, I'm going to go ahead and tie the white and yellow for the belly and tie the darker colors on top. A lot of these killies have a lot of yellow kind of near their undersection and their belly, so I wanted to add some fluorescent yellow so it's not just white throughout the belly section of the fly. And you can see me here, I'm just adding a little bit more olive and a little bit of gray just to kind of help fill up the profile. It's better to have more material on top than it is the bottom, so that way we ensure the fly swims properly and turns over. And we're going to be trimming the fly here, so a lot of this material is going to be taken off. Being very careful with your thread wrapping to ensure that we're evenly wrapping the thread top and bottom so we don't have an uneven collar when we fold it back. And if you need to, you can pull on some of the material so that way it's even when you fold it back. It pays to be careful with your thread wrapping and try and build a nice even V-tie, but also not build too much bulk. Now for the last tie, taking a page out of Bob Popovich's book, Jonny King likes to do a hollow tie. So we're actually, instead of tying it like a traditional hollow tie where all of the material is off the front, I'm going to tie it directly in the middle, almost like a V-tie. I'm going to go ahead and also add some pink here to the side so we get a little bit of pink in the cheeks just for a little accent of color. And then checking here to make sure I have enough material, I'm going to make sure it's evenly spread 360 degrees around the hook. Now taking our professional hollow tie tool here, a spool of thread, I'm just going to fold this back and weave my thread through where the two materials meet, the two colors. And then pulling it back nice and tight, I'm going to go ahead and build a thread dam right in front of the material. Now we are going to be gluing eyes on here and then coating the front section of the head in liquid fusion. You don't need to go crazy with the thread dam, but you do want to secure the material down. Jonny King mentions that he doesn't like having a thread beak on the front of his fly. That's why this hollow tie helps ensure that we have a nice taper on the front of this fly. Now we're going to throw a couple whip finishes in here, and we can actually take our brush and start brushing this material out because we're going to go ahead and get ready to start trimming the head of this fly. You can see why it's important that we use enough material, because once we start trimming this fly, if you have any gaps in between your V-ties or you didn't use enough material on a particular tie, you'll start seeing areas where it's very thin. So now the trick to getting the initial head, the shape and the profile of this fly, we're actually going to use our thumb here. By taking your thumb and pinching the fly right behind the hook eye, you can then kind of pivot where your thumb is and then just guide your scissors along your thumb and just start creating the start of the head of the fly. And this way you can kind of match the profile top and bottom roughly without cutting too much, because your thumb is going to prevent that. And now I'm going to start trimming some off the side of the fly here, ever so slightly. We're just going to start thinning out the amount of material. Because if we took the fly initially off of the vise and started fishing it, it would just sit on top of the water. There would just be way too much material. So it's really important that we trim down enough material on the fly that it's actually going to turn over properly and it's not just going to float. But we also don't want to cut too much off to where we lose that beautiful 3D taper that we just created, right? So we're just going to go slow and look at the fly from the front, from the sides, from the back, from the bottom, the top, everything, and just try and get that 3D profile figured out. You can see here I'm taking some off at a 45-degree angle on the left. There was too much material there, so I'm just thinning it down ever so slightly. And you also see I generally have my scissors kind of slightly angled outwards because I don't want to cut too much off. It's very easy to cut too much material off. You'd rather take less off and then you can keep trimming it. And I can come here, revisit the head by pinching it and keeping that shape or that profile that I'm trying to achieve. And if I need to, I can thin out this left side some more. I can see there's a little too much material up on the wing. That could cause the fly to track improperly because that material on that left side, the way we're looking at it, would essentially cause that side to ride higher up in the water column. So just taking our time, thinning it down, again looking at it from multiple angles. And it is important, we don't want to take too much material here because we are going to essentially change the shape of the fly once we glue eyes on here. You're going to see it's going to pinch the sides and it's going to push some of that material up. So we are going to do another round of trimming. If you're really trying to get precise, you can always turn the fly around and trim from the back to front, because you're essentially cutting against the grain so the material isn't compressing. But just be careful because you can really take off a lot of material cutting against the grain, we'll say. And now I'm just going to brush it out real quick and we'll put it back on the vise and we're ready to glue some eyes on here. Now with certain 3D eyes and synthetic materials, a lot of times I'll just use this E6000 and some 3D eyes. These are size 9/32 silver 3D eyes from saltwaterflies.com. And the E6000 you can just get at a hardware store. It's a great industrial adhesive. There's also Loctite Liquid Seal, I believe, and there's a product that Zap Gap makes. But all we're going to do here is take a dollop or two, and I like applying it to the rear section of the eye. I'm going to use the eye as a tool and just apply a little bit of E6000. And then I can kind of spread it around just a little bit and just put the eye further forward than I want it. Then because most of that glue is focused on the rear section of the eye, we're going to push it down and then push back at the same time, pushing it to where we want it. And that's going to slowly spread that glue, not only pushing it into the material, but then spreading it and sliding that eye is going to secure that eye because the glue will be fully covering the backside of the eye. Good idea to push the eyes in after a while because E6000 as it dries will kind of expand. So just remember to push the eyes back in. And now you can see here the taper or the profile of the fly is slightly changed, and now we can kind of get a better idea of what the fly is going to look like when it's finished. So it's a good time to just go around and do your final really, I guess, detail trimming here, and we're just going to try and get the profile exactly how we want it. Because once we cover the head in E6000, it's going to be a lot less convenient to trim, and we really don't want to trim it afterwards. You can do a little bit if we need to, but we really want to get our shape of the fly here kind of finalized. And that's looking pretty good to me, so I'm going to take some liquid fusion here. Now this is a water-based glue, so it's going to thin out really good. But that being said, I'm still going to apply a little too much here, but I'd rather have a little too much because I'm really going to kind of work this around and make sure that I cover those eyes. So I'm going to take my bodkin and a little piece of paper so I can get the excess off. And it's important to make sure that that liquid fusion fully coats the 3D eyes. I'm actually going to go a little bit behind the eyes. We're going to get a nice, strong, secure head here by fully coating those eyes. And just slowly working it in, trying to get that liquid fusion to get into some of the material as well, so it kind of soaks in over time. And just wiping any excess off my bodkin so I can keep working with it. Once I get it where I like it, I can start spreading it towards the top of the head, because we don't have too much liquid fusion on there, so it's not going to get too out of control. And I can start kind of creating a natural taper, or a better taper to our liquid fusion. But again, I like focusing most of it further back on the sides behind those eyes, so I don't apply as much top and bottom. There's a couple rogue hairs here. This is after the fly has dried for a couple hours. The liquid fusion thins out a lot, as you can see, but it makes a nice durable head. So we're just going to trim a couple of these rogue hairs that have kind of dried, sticking out. Just slowly rotating, looking to see if there's any hairs that are kind of ruining the profile. But other than that, that's looking pretty good right there. So there we go, Jonny King's Kinky Muddler. This is essentially tying it 1-for-1 the way that Jonny King's ties his Kinky Muddler in an example where he shows how to tie a roosterfish fly. So I took this pattern and attempted my best imitation of a striped Killie. You can see the 3D profile on this fly is unbelievable. It really pushes water, and it's a great way of imitating certain baitfish where you need to get that shape and profile to get an accurate imitation. You can see here the striped Killie or the Mumachug, which we have in our back bays. They stick around year round, even through the winter. They're a classic springtime bait that I like to imitate really early in the season. So we'll take this down to the local creek and let's see how it swims. Now once you get this thing wet and it starts getting further down on the water column, the action is unbelievable. The tail really starts dancing around because of the tented hackle. It's one of the reasons why we wrapped our mono under that tail and created that pocket, if you will. And that 3D profile on the head helps generate movement in the tail. As the water hits the head, it swirls around and then hits that pocket underneath the tail. Well, I'll be fishing this fly more this spring as the fishing season heats up here. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. My name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new fly tying and fly fishing videos coming out every week. We have live fly tying and early access for members. Have a great fishing season out there this year. Until the next video, we'll see ya. Tight lines.